among numerous ancient civilizations lead many to speculate this might be more than just a handbag.
Across ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, divine figures hold a mysterious object, the ancient handbag.
Many have speculated that what we are seeing is advanced technology. This ancient complex dates back to 10,000 BC.
Identical in shape and posture, this motif appears in sacred art worldwide, despite no known contact between cultures. Now, Graham Hancock has an answer. These handbags are not mere symbols, but relics of a lost advanced civilization, or even evidence of time travelers seeding knowledge across the globe. Could these mysterious bags have carried tools, wisdom, or something far greater? Join us as we explore the astonishing connections and decode the enigma that might just rewrite everything we know about human history. The truth awaits. Spread of the handbag motif. The ancient handbag motif is a visual enigma that appears in carvings, reliefs, and monuments across numerous, geographically distant civilizations. Most famously, the motif is found in Mesopotamian art, particularly among the Sumerians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, where gods or divine figures often hold a small, structured object resembling a modern handbag. Surprisingly, nearly identical symbols have been discovered in Mesoamerica, especially among the Olmec and Toltec cultures, where the motif also appears in religious or ceremonial imagery. Further east, similar depictions are seen in ancient Indian temple carvings and Southeast Asian structures in Indonesia. Even in regions as far-flung as Anatolia, ancient Hittites, the Italian peninsula, Etruscans, and petroglyphs from North America, the handbag-shaped symbol persists. This widespread appearance raises a striking question. How did a highly specific design find its way into such vastly separated cultures? One of the most perplexing aspects of this distribution is the complete absence of known historical contact between many of these ancient civilizations. The Sumerians and the Olmecs, for instance, existed on opposite sides of the world, with no record of communication, trade, or migration between them. Similarly, ancient Indian civilizations and those of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica developed independently, separated not just by geography, but also by time. Despite these barriers, the handbag motif appears in visually consistent forms across their art, often portrayed with a looped handle and a solid base, and usually held in the same upward-facing position. This uniformity suggests more than a coincidental similarity and challenges the idea that each culture independently developed the motif by chance. In the case of different civilizations, this motif's significant time lag heightens the enigma. The Mesopotamian representations date back some 5,000 years, while the Mesoamerican examples date back to cultures that reached their peaks thousands of years later. In areas such as Indonesia and Anatolia, the motif appears in regimes that splinter further into the historical record. This chronological expanse seems to indicate that the symbol of the handbag per se may have survived or was reintroduced into different epochs, hinting that it was either considered of great importance all along or perhaps emerged from cultural memory or rediscovery. Theories put forward in attempts to explain this phenomenon vary widely. Some speculate that the handbag motif in the various regions emerged separately as a universal symbol stemming from a shared repertoire of human experience. Perhaps it bears the meaning of implements or tools or knowledge and good gifts from God. Others suggest that an early worldwide civilization or seafaring culture might have given a common nucleus from which the motif spread into the ancient world. No one theory is entirely effective at explaining all the aspects of the problem, but the worldwide uniformity of the symbol has drawn much interest from researchers and raises questions about early human interconnections. That kind of global spread is puzzling enough, But what's even stranger is how identical the handbags actually look, right down to the grip, shape, and placement. Iconography and artistic consistency. One of the most striking aspects of the ancient handbag motif is the remarkable consistency in its visual design across multiple, disconnected cultures. Despite the wide geographical range from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica to Southeast Asia, the handbag is consistently depicted with specific stylistic features. Most commonly, it has a semicircular handle attached to a rectangular or square body. This design remains constant across time and geography, with little variation in proportion or structure. In nearly all representations, the handle arches symmetrically above the base, giving the object a sturdy, purposeful look. Whether carved in stone, etched in reliefs, or painted onto temple walls, the motif appears intentional and well-defined, not abstract or symbolic in form. Equally notable is the way these handbags are held. Across many depictions, the grip posture is the same. The figure's fingers are upturned, grasping the handle from beneath, almost reverently. This posture is not only consistent, but deliberate, indicating a formal or ceremonial handling of the object. It appears in Sumerian reliefs, where gods or divine beings hold the handbag beside other symbols of authority, and in Mesoamerican art, where similar figures exhibit the same grip. Even in distant regions like Indonesia, figures are shown with the object held in a similar fashion. This grip consistency suggests more than practicality. It implies a ritualistic or symbolic protocol in how the object was meant to be presented. It reiterates the importance of the handbag by locating it more or less centrally in the carving's composition or giving it spatial prominence against other objects or figures. For instance, in many reliefs, one sees the handbag with symbols of divinity, such as the tree of life, or they're located under heaven, hinting at its exalted status. An appropriate scale with the individual holding it, never so large as to dominate the scene, yet never so small as to make the observer describe it as decorative, has also been employed. Indeed, it is visible in compositions because it plays an important visual or symbolic role, rather than just being a background detail. Does that then mean that all ancient artists had a common visual language or template? Perhaps, since it may have evolved, but it is simple to find forms of handbags independent of context. The fact, however, that it agrees from continent to continent, from age to age, and from creed to creed, favors the replication or borrowing hypothesis. Whether through oral tradition, lost text, or some culture unknown to all of us, what still makes the handbag motif so compelling and mysterious is that the replication seems to have spread so broadly. Religious and mythical contexts. In many ancient cultures, the handbag motif consistently appears within sacred, religious, or mythological contexts, often held by figures associated with divine or ritual authority. In Mesopotamian art, for example, the motif is frequently seen in the hands of gods, such as the Apkalus, semi-divine beings who were believed to bring wisdom and order to humanity. These figures are typically shown holding a handbag in one hand and a pine cone-like object in the other, suggesting the performance of a ceremonial act. Similarly, in Mesoamerican cultures like the Olmecs and Toltecs, depictions of priest-like or divine beings often include a similar bag-shaped object, reinforcing its role within a ceremonial framework rather than a mundane setting. These handbags are not randomly inserted into artistic compositions. They often appear in scenes of cosmological importance or religious ritual. For instance, in Mesopotamian reliefs, the handbag is sometimes positioned near the tree of life, a central symbol of spiritual balance and divine order. In such depictions, the handbag is not merely present, but deliberately integrated into symbolic narratives that reflect cosmic or spiritual principles. In other cultures, such as ancient India or Indonesia, the handbag appears in temple carvings amid divine processions, offerings, or scenes of blessing. Its presence in these types of narratives reinforces the idea that it held a sacred role, though what that role was remains uncertain. There are differences between a handbag and other things in sacred art. Weapons, staffs, or ritual implements force interpretation based on their frequency and proper and improper uses. The handbag, in contrast, occurs almost entirely in divine or mythic settings. Hardly, if ever, is it shown in a house, farming, or everyday living setting. Such sporadic placement relates to a purpose or identity far from being ordinary. The absence of other mundane items in the same sacred frames serves to compete with the handbag in being a uniquely treated object, indeed, of divine or spiritual importance. Interpretations may indeed vary, yet one thing stands illuminously clear. The handbag is placed within ancient ecclesiastical art parameters at a position of perceived and symbolic prominence. Throughout the different cultures, it may stand centrally through some focal point within sacred contexts. Rather, artists view it as something more serious and devoid of subservience, an integral element of the religious visual lexicon. It may be under debate what a handbag actually represents, but its presence within a sacred context is a constant that must indicate that it meant something of great worth to the cultures that depicted it. Mainstream archaeological interpretations. Mainstream archaeology has generally approached the ancient handbag motif with practical, utilitarian explanations. Scholars often suggest that the object is a simple basket, seed pouch, or container used in agricultural or ritual settings. In Mesopotamian depictions, for instance, the handbag is thought to represent a bag of pollen, incense, or medicinal herbs, possibly used in purification rites. In other regions, such as Mesoamerica or Anatolia, the motif is similarly explained as a tool or container carried by religious or elite figures. These interpretations rest on the assumption that the handbag-like shape is not symbolic, but functional, an everyday item immortalized in art due to its ceremonial or economic importance. However, these explanations begin to unravel when one examines the context in which the motif appears. The handbag is almost exclusively found in sacred or mythological scenes, often in the hands of gods, sages, or culture bringers. This placement raises doubts about it being a mundane item. For instance, we rarely see other common tools, like plows, baskets of food, or water jars, depicted alongside divine figures in such settings. The handbag stands out not only for its consistent design, but also for its selective and elevated usage. If it were merely a utilitarian object, it would likely appear in a broader range of art, including depictions of daily life, which it does not. Academics tend to be hesitant to consider alternate or symbolic interpretations of the handbag motif. Any interpretation, such as metaphysical, cosmological, or technological, is usually dismissed as pseudoscience or fringe speculation. It is certainly true that skepticism is a critical component in the rigorous examination of any subject. However, this reluctance sometimes becomes the very fence that confounds any earnest inquiry in the field. On the other hand, more outlandish proposals being put forward by investigators' speculative theories suggest lost civilizations, alternate history, or symbolic meanings disprove the conventional narrative, thereby placing these people mostly outside the pale of acceptance. The very caution prevailing in academia to preserve its integrity limits the investigation of the more mystifying aspects of the motif. The handbag motif might have a drastic importance and dimensions rarely studied, and would actually call for an investigation by a historian. The handbag object has shown much consistency from cultural and geographical standpoints, yet such consistency is still poorly documented by conventional archaeology. Why is it always the way to hold it by the same sorts of figures, and in such spiritually charged settings? Why would it never show up in any mundane or domestic or secular settings? These questions that remain unanswered would, therefore, suggest that the mainstream view lacks the explanatory power when it comes to grappling with the complexity and cultural intentions of the handbag motif. Until such time as the academic world is willing to look these inadequacies in the eye, they shall remain unresolved mysteries. Cosmological and metaphysical symbolism. One of the more compelling interpretations of the ancient handbag motif is that it serves as a symbolic representation of cosmic or metaphysical concepts. In this view, the motif's recurring shape, a semicircular handle above a square or rectangular base, carries profound meaning. Some theorists suggest that the semicircle represents the sky or heavens, while the square base symbolizes the earth. This simple yet elegant design could thus encapsulate the ancient understanding of the universe's dual structure, the celestial realm above and the terrestrial plane below. Such duality is a common theme in many ancient cosmologies, where the relationship between heaven and earth was central to spiritual belief systems. The handbag's placement in sacred art further reinforces its possible cosmological significance. It is often seen near or in conjunction with sacred symbols such as the Tree of Life, a universal emblem of divine order and spiritual connectivity. In Mesopotamian art, for example, handbag-like objects appear flanking the Tree of Life, hinting at a symbolic function related to balance and cosmic structure. The Tree of Life itself often served as a metaphor for the axis mundi, a central point connecting all levels of existence. In this context, the handbag could represent a stabilizing force, a vessel or device that holds the essence of equilibrium between spiritual and physical dimensions. From the start, the motif can act as an interworldly symbolic bridge, linking the divine with materiality or the eternal with time-bound human affairs. In ancient cultures, symbols were used to propose what metaphysical ideas could not otherwise articulate. The handbag, within such a context, could signify in pictorial ways the access to divine wisdom, or perhaps hidden truths within the heart. To speak of the handbag as possessing a finite whole or self-coughing symptom suggests archetypal sacred knowledge manifest in material expression. In this regard, the idea reinforces the inclination of the motif into spiritual or ritualistic scenes, only straining the assertion that it carried other associations beyond mere material utility. What differentiates this interpretive framework is that it is concerned purely with form and symbolism, without regard to the individual persons using the handbag or the specific stories of that myth. It sees the motif as an ideogram abstract entity meant to communicate some very complex truths about existence. Even though there is no text explicitly confirming this symbolic reading, the fact that the handbag so often occurs with cosmic connotations in many cultures suggests that this form was purposefully intended to resonate with certain commonly held metaphysical ideas. In this light, the handbag can be seen as signifying a sort of cosmological visual tongue that has been forgotten tongue whose meanings transcended boundaries and ages. Just when the handbag seems rooted in ancient cosmology, another theory dares to drag it far into the future. Literally, the time travel hypothesis. The time travel hypothesis is one of the most controversial and speculative interpretations of the ancient handbag motif. Proponents of this idea suggest that these handbag-like objects are not ancient at all, but rather futuristic or modern artifacts introduced into the past by time travelers. This theory falls into the broader category of alleged anachronisms in ancient art, images or objects that seem to depict technology or knowledge far beyond what the civilization should have possessed. Examples frequently cited include ancient carvings that resemble astronauts in spacesuits, figures operating what appear to be control panels, and objects that look suspiciously like laptops, wristwatches, or flying machines. The presence of these strange images fuels the belief that time travelers, either human or otherwise, may have interacted with early human societies. The handbag motif fits into this narrative due to its striking resemblance to modern carrying cases. The structured form, with a looped handle and compact rectangular body, looks almost identical to today's purses, tool bags, or even high-tech device cases. To the modern eye, this similarity is immediately noticeable, and for advocates of the time travel theory, it is no coincidence. They argue that if a person from the future were to travel back in time, they would naturally bring personal or functional items with them, objects like bags to carry supplies, instruments, or technology. In this context, the handbag in ancient carvings may not be symbolic at all, but a literal depiction of what observers in the past saw and recorded without understanding its purpose. This theory, if true, carries some heavy implications. It implies that human history has been tampered with or affected by events and beings from future eras. In this case, interference would explain the sudden influx of knowledge, architecture, or technology in primitive societies. It would also mean that these carvings are not mere symbols of representation, but actual eyewitness records of happenings faced by time travelers. While the theory is, to a point, a stretch of the scientific credibility, its logic within is compelling. If time travel were ever invented, theoretically, it could be that travelers visited the past and left traces of their presence inadvertently. On a cultural note, the time travel hypothesis sits on the fringes and is mostly dismissed by mainstream archaeology and historians. Nonetheless, it has continued to offer the public what it would like to imagine, especially in online communities, speculative documentaries, and alternative history literature. It is easy to see why this theory became so popular. It's simple and visual, ancient peoples carving what they saw, however strange. Even if devoid of empirical evidence, it asks difficult questions about how we interpret ancient art and what assumptions we bring into the study of the past with modernity's lens. Hancock's Lost Civilization Theory. Graham Hancock's Lost Civilization Theory proposes that an advanced human culture existed prior to the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, and that its remnants are subtly embedded in the symbols, structures, and stories of ancient civilizations. According to Hancock, this civilization was highly sophisticated, possessing advanced knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and navigation. Following its collapse, due to factors he links to cataclysmic events, its survivors traveled the globe, passing down fragments of their knowledge to early human societies. These early civilizations, such as the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Mesoamericans, are not the originators of complex culture, but rather the inheritors of a far older tradition. The handbag motif, in Hancock's view, is one of the most visually consistent and enduring traces of this lost legacy. The repeated appearance of the handbag motif across disparate civilizations is interpreted by Hancock as a deliberate visual marker, like a calling card, left by this forgotten culture. He suggests that the motif's consistent form, often depicted in the hands of revered figures or in sacred art, indicates that it symbolized something universally recognized by those with access to this ancient knowledge. Rather than being a mundane object or a religious symbol in isolation, The handbag was a kind of emblem, a visual shorthand for the wisdom and tools carried by the bearers of civilization. Its global presence implies that these knowledge bearers intentionally spread it as a recognizable sign of their influence. Hancock argued that these ancient carriers of wisdom were not land voyagers, but people capable of long-distance sea travel. He posits that this lost civilization had mastered navigation and sailing, with which they could get to faraway places such as Mesoamerica, the Indus Valley, and Mesopotamia, well before historians claim this was possible. Hancock describes these ancient mariners as civilization bringers, who carried knowledge of mathematics, agriculture, and architecture, thereby aiding the rise of those cultures we now consider as laying the seeds of human civilization. The handbag motif found in distant coastal civilizations is visual evidence of their visits and influence. Unlike the purely symbolic interpretations, Hancock's theory treats the handbag as a concrete artifact of transmission, not a sign of mythology, but one firmly rooted in the concrete cultural exchange of a now-gone past. By presenting the motif as a marker of prehistoric diffusion, Hancock stands against the idea that each ancient civilization grew alone. In his theory, there emerges a necessity to rethink how advanced knowledge could have been in any manner preserved and spread. It suggests that the ancient handbag symbol could be one of the few remaining clues that were alive to tell about a decidedly unknown chapter in human history. Mythical knowledge bearers. Across a wide range of ancient mythologies, certain recurring figures emerge, semi-divine beings or cultural heroes credited with bringing knowledge, technology, and order to humanity. These knowledge bearers often appear in the earliest myths of civilizations, serving as pivotal characters in the transition from chaos to civilization. One such figure is Oannes, from ancient Mesopotamian lore. Described as part man and part fish, Oannes emerged from the sea to teach early humans essential skills such as writing, agriculture, and the construction of cities. Alongside Oannes, Mesopotamian texts also speak of the 7 sages, Apkallu, beings associated with divine wisdom and order, often shown in stylized reliefs, frequently carrying objects resembling handbags. This motif is not exclusive to Mesopotamia. In Mesoamerican mythology, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, is credited with bringing civilization to the Toltecs and other cultures. He taught them agriculture, astronomy, and the arts, and is sometimes depicted holding or standing near mysterious pouches or containers that resemble the handbag motif. Similarly, in ancient Egyptian lore, the god Thoth, deity of wisdom, writing, and magic, is known for his role in structuring the cosmos and creating the written word. Though not always shown with a bag, Thoth is frequently associated with sacred tools or scrolls that echo the concept of portable knowledge. These examples suggest a broad mythological pattern. Culture bringers are often equipped with a compact, portable item used to store or dispense sacred information. And the one common thing that really stands out among all these representations is the fact of carrying with them handbag-like objects in teaching or creating. Not divine authority alone, but mostly those who bear on their own shoulders those who are not on par with anything other than justifications or creation. But they are all instructors, givers of knowledge, for they do not take up arms, nor rule. The objects they are carrying are not shown as weapons or ornaments, but something functional and essential to their role. Thus, this handbag figuratively could be seen as a teaching symbol, a picture to symbolize their mission to educate early humanity. Be it tools or scrolls, seeds, or ill-defined wisdom, the motif is ever associated with figures whose cause one can say is civilization, elevation through instruction. Crucially, this perspective does not interpret the handbag generic symbol or coded message. Rather, it treats it as an organic part of mythological narration that validates a bearer as a culture giver. These widely repeated ideas probably are consistent across civilizations. After all, Sumerian, Egyptian, Mesoamerican, and others seem to have a common narrative structure in which the origins of civilization are always associated with being who knew but who also carried that knowledge with them physically. In this sense, the handbag becomes a kind of mythical hallmark of enlightenment and teaching. The cataclysm and post-disaster diffusion. The theory of a prehistoric cataclysm, most notably associated with the Younger Dryas event, offers a compelling framework for understanding the potential origins and spread of the ancient handbag motif. The Younger Dryas, which occurred around 12,800 years ago, was a sudden and dramatic return to near-glacial conditions after a period of warming. Many scientists and independent researchers believe this event, possibly triggered by a comet impact or rapid climate change, led to widespread flooding, massive ecological disruption, and the collapse of early human settlements. Remarkably, global flood myths, from Noah's Ark in the Hebrew Bible to Ziusudra in Sumerian texts, seem to echo a collective memory of this catastrophic period. These stories often describe humanity being reset and knowledge being preserved or passed down after the deluge. Following such a disaster, it is plausible that small groups of survivors, possibly remnants of a highly developed culture, retained fragments of their knowledge and technologies. These survivors could have dispersed globally, bringing their expertise to emerging or rebuilding societies. This theory posits that the sudden appearance of agriculture, writing, astronomical knowledge, and architectural precision in disparate regions may not have developed independently, but rather stemmed from a shared origin point that predates recorded history. These traveling knowledge bearers, who may have lived through or inherited the aftermath of the cataclysm, became the carriers of a legacy once held by a now lost civilization. This theory grants the handbag motif the potential for a more operative historical signification. Not in a metaphorical or decorative sense, rather it is in the sense that the handbag could literally be an implement for carrying tools, seeds, or implements necessary for survival, as well as the passing of knowledge. By means of these survivors bringing back life into their societies, the idea of the handbag as an entity carrying such tools would have had its own memory sculptured into stone, or temple icons, or ceremonial art, not for what it meant, but for what exactly it carried. Toward this meaning begins the handbag's appearance in different, non-connected civilizations. It commemorates the real-world storage and passing of critical information and tools during a time of disaster recovery. The handbag is therefore conceived of as a productive artifact, symbolizing humanity's efforts to reenact the history of the world. The motif appears consistently across diverse and disconnected cultures, giving the impression of a physical echo of a now coordinated effort by a small number of advanced people seeking to restore all that was known and lost. And there would not be any myth about it. The motif probably looks like real survival, well-preserved tools and wisdom thrown into the hands of the weak and needy, just so they get back on their feet. If the handbag once carried the tools to rebuild civilization, what if it also carried something even more powerful? Information encoded for minds across millennia. The handbag as a visual code. The ancient handbag motif, often dismissed as a mundane object, may instead function as a deliberate visual code designed to preserve and transmit information across time and culture. Some researchers have proposed that these handbag-like forms were not literal bags at all, but rather glyphs or ideograms, symbols embedded with layers of meaning recognizable to those initiated in a specific knowledge system. In this interpretation, the handbag motif operates as a mnemonic device, a compact visual element used to trigger the recollection of more complex ideas, much like how modern logos or emblems encapsulate brand identity or function. The consistency of its form and context hints that it may have served a similar cognitive role in ancient times. This idea gains further credibility when the handbag motif is compared to other ancient systems of visual communication, such as Egyptian hieroglyphs, Norse runes, or Sumerian cuneiform. In these systems, symbols often transcend their literal appearances to convey philosophical, spiritual, or instructional content. A single glyph might represent a sound, a concept, or a deity, depending on its context. Similarly, the handbag's repeated appearance in highly specific scenarios, often alongside cosmic or ceremonial elements, suggests that it might encode knowledge not easily conveyed through text or speech. Like a stylized icon, it could have been part of a lost symbolic lexicon understood across various ancient civilizations. That's all we were concerned with until now, regarding the handbag's wonderful neutrals in shape and recurrence in the semiotic world. However, having said that, a smaller outline would have been an object much like an ideogram to represent a store of information throughout cultures with reference to an entire teaching or practice. Then, the handbag does not stand for something specific, but an immense body of knowledge or cultural memory. This may have fallen into specialized farming knowledge, mapping of the stars, or sacred laws, facts much too scant for thorough elucidation, wholly worthy of illustrative memory. The symbol then becomes less of a riddle and more of a visual shorthand, serving as a repetitive reminder of something poignant down the generations. By invoking the handbag as a semiotic instrument, this reading leaps past both mythology and symbolism to view it through another lens, as part of a refined and demanding visual communication system. Encoded knowledge would find its index and be graphically marked in time by the handbag for its artistic tradition, meant to ensure the continuity of information. This view sets the stage for an extended investigation of ancient visual language, and while it entertains the possibilities that other symbols that evade interpretation could have engaged in equally valuable but also now forgotten codes of communication. If this mystery blew your mind, just wait until you see what's next. Hit that like button if you learned something new, subscribe so you don't miss the next ancient revelation, and drop a comment with your theory. Could Hancock be right? And don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen to dive even deeper into the hidden secrets of our forgotten past.